the Moore McGuffey Readers. This is a real classic collection. Do you know that they were written over 100 years ago by the McGuffeys? And the Moores have put them into this format to make it more current for the modern parent. Okay, let me tell you about them. The First Reader is for the child that is just starting to learn to read. So if you want to refer to grades, and it's grade 1 and 2 approximately, and then going on to 3 and 4, 5 or 6 to 7, 8, 9, 10, or actually older. This goes all the way to adult reading level, and in fact even up to university level. So that's the spectrum. It starts at the beginning all the way through to grade 12 and more. So you might wonder, well, why McGuffey Readers? Why would you have McGuffey Reader? First of all, I can tell you that they focus on morals. Each story is actually an opportunity to teach a moral or a value of some kind for life. So that is a plus most definitely, because you don't find that in modern literature very easily these days. So you can be safe with that. Let me actually just dive in and show you how it works. In the beginning of the book, it will give you instruction on how to use this book, the new Moore McGuffey formula. It will show you how to use the book. Well, not show you, tell you. You read through that as the parent. And then you start with the lessons. See, they're called lessons, not stories, because lesson 1 has got a few sentences in the first story. That's it. It's finished now. And then there's the next story. It's very carefully laid out, the size of the font, the space between the letters, the size of the letters, and so on. This is all because they are considering that early reader stage. You'll find that as you start moving through the lessons, they start to introduce vocabulary words at the end for you to discuss or help the child to read them and practice reading those particular words. You see, there's most commonly used words at the end of each story. So that is how it proceeds throughout the book. Okay, so that would be the first reader. Your second reader, you're going to notice that the writing is a little bit smaller. And now that you've got a few comprehension questions to see if the child has understood the story they've read, the short story they've read. And that is the format throughout the second reader. Third reader is similar again, but here, once again, now you can see the stories are going to become longer and longer, and the text is smaller. And then you've got the fourth reader. And once again, you'll see the font is now even smaller, and the stories are even longer in this particular last volume. I'd like to tell you something else about these books, and that is, it's really, really hard to go to a library or to find any selection of readers for your children that are going to systematically take them inch by inch by inch along the reading journey. For example, if you went to the library and you got some reading books that were at the level of reading that your child is at currently, and now you go back a few months later, you have to find books that are a little bit more advanced because the reading has moved on. Well, it's going to be difficult to get that right, to know that you are not getting a book that's too difficult or too easy, and see to it that your child is progressively moving through the levels of reading. Obviously, that does happen with the reading or language program that you might be using. For example, at Oikos, we offer you lateral learning language arts through literature, and there the readers are specifically selected for each level of reading. But the McGuffey readers go even deeper into that, and that from the first story to the very next story, there's a tiny little bit of a little inch forward in the ability, in the skills that are being trained, in the reading skills specifically we're talking about. And then the next story, the same thing happens, and so it goes on. We found how we used this was I got our children to sit and read a little story, McGuffey story, to me each day. Once they'd finished reading their story, then I did read aloud with them a whole chapter of whatever story we were reading while they were sitting doing crafts. That is what we did with these books, to help so that I could actually hear their reading aloud skills, to guide them with that, to see where they were getting struggling with certain vocabulary and so on. as I've already mentioned, each story is an opportunity to teach a lesson as well. So that actually could be carried through in life. Whatever the little McGuffey story they had read, I'd be able to reference back to that. So that was helpful. Another interesting fact is that these were the books that were used to teach children to read many, many years ago, more than 100 years ago. They didn't have wonderful phonic programs and language programs that are available to us today. This is what they used. The McGuffey Readers were actually the teaching the children to read program. This was it. Sadly, these are just passed by, which is a shame, because they are rich in their moral content. And not all modern literature is as such. So that is why I encourage people to use them. Even though they may say to me, oh, but they're a bit old-fashioned and they find that they may be a bit heavy-going or the story's a bit serious. And I think, well, I'd like to encourage you to think of that a little differently. There needs to be that serious element in some parts of our learning as well. I'm sure you will agree with that. I'm very big on having fun and making sure that learning is a lot of fun and don't get too serious about it all. But at the same time, there is a lot to be gained from books that were written many, many years ago for us that we can now share with our own children. Lastly, I'd like to point out that there's no rush. If you're going to be taking a break from your formal learning and you're going on a family holiday, you might want to take one of your McGuffey books along with you just to keep the reading going, but not to feel like it has to be done. There's not pressure. There shouldn't be pressure with these books. You basically got there from grade 1 all the way through to the end to get through these 4 books. So there's a lot of time to do it. In fact, the Moores encourage you to go slowly with going through these books, not to race it, not to rush, even if the same story must be reread a number of times until it's read fluently. That is better than feeling you've got to start on page 1 and get to the end of the book by a certain time. Rather take your time with them. Please don't rush them. And I really do hope that you're going to find the value in them as we have done.